Stan Lee doing my subtle cameo.
Excuse me, Mr. Stan.
Well, that is comic book icon and cameo connoisseur Stan Lee. But sadly, he did die yesterday at the age of 95, leaving behind a legacy that includes some of the most famous superheroes ever. Characters like Spider-Man, Iron Man, I liked Iceman personally, and a slew of other Marvel Comics mainstays. With that, we did invite today CBC News film critic Eli Glasner. He joins us with his thoughts on passing of Stan Lee, because you're a huge Marvel and comic book fan of the genre.
I appreciate the Iceman choice. He did give us X-Men amongst many others.
Absolutely. And you are wearing your Spider-Man t-shirt in honor of Stan Lee.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Okay. So as we talk about your great power and responsibility, let's also talk about Stan Lee, his life and legacy.
I mean, it's like the Greek gods. Like, he dreamt up this new mythic universe. I was scrolling through Instagram yesterday, and I was just amazed to see, like, I always knew Stan Lee. I grew up with Stan Lee. I'm used to reading his letters in the back pages of Marvel Comics, but to see the level of artists and actors and just regular people that he touched was astounding. And I noticed something that Mark Ruffalo, who of course played Bruce Banner and the Hulk, he talked about the superhuman characters. But really, that's what Stan gave us, was the superhuman, in that they were extra human. We had already had kind of like these typical heroes, your Supermans, your Batmans, and they were very much like Greek gods, almost perfect. But he came up with this idea of giving us heroes that reflected us, our flaws, our foibles. You look at Hulk's rage, Iron Man's arrogance and addiction, Spider-Man's humble goodness, the guilt over that one bad choice, Daredevil, blind, driven to excel, etc., etc. Marvel heroes had jobs. They worried about their mortgages. And you know, you look at, like, The Thing, one of the first comics he created, Fantastic Four, this, like, tragic, rock-like character, and this kind of soft teddy bear guy trapped under all that. He also, and you think of the movies now, you think of all of the ways that the Marvel movies interrelate, he came up with that idea of the shared universe, right? The Avengers hung out in New York City, and sometimes they would bump into that guy, Spider-Man, or sometimes it would be Daredevil, or sometimes it would be someone else. So he came with that idea of really writ large, that idea of like massive comic continuity. And I was listening to Todd McFarlane yesterday. He was talking on As It Happens, and he said the other thing that Stan was great was in the ambassador for comics. He could have taught a master class in just how to deal with fans. Todd McFarlane, Canadian, who gave us Spawn and other heroes, he met Stan Lee when he was 16. And he spent hours just at his knee, listening to the stories that Stan had to say. And the sad thing about Stan Lee is, in the latter years of his life, Marvel renegotiated his deal just before these movies you're watching exploded. So he didn't really have a share of those profits, but those cameos, of course, he will live on. And we also get a sense that he lived to see all these heroes, like right there he is. We live to see all these heroes really suddenly resonate with the public, go out from the basements of comic collectors to just become a global phenomenon. So it is great that there he is, you know, talking to Peter Parker, that he lived to see all these things that he helped dream up, you know, conquer the world, really.
Yeah, and in creating these superheroes in his own life, a real-life superhero to so many comic book fans like yourself, like me growing up. But that said, he also had controversy in his life.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. He is very much like a hero he created, in that there is a lot of interesting questions about his origin story and just how much he really is responsible for. Because in the early days, I mean, he had this run in the comics from 61 to 72, where he just gave us, you know, X-Men, Daredevil, Black Panther, the Avengers, I mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he was working with Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby, and they worked in the Marvel style. The Marvel style is you sit down with your artist and you say, okay, well, here's the idea for this issue. Fantastic Four fight Dr. Doom, and then there's a robot, and then Invisible Girl saves the day. And then the artist, like Jack Kirby, would go out and draw that and essentially really do a big part of the plotting. And then at the end, Stan Lee would come in and add the dialogue. But Stan Lee was very much at the forefront as the writer and the voice of Marvel Comics, because the big thing he was, like I said, the ambassador. He was the one talking to the fans on the lettering page age, and he really became the face of Marvel Comics. So when you look at Jack Kirby, when you look at Steve Ditko, who helped create Spider-Man, who was the artist and says he did a lot more than Stan Lee and did a lot more to kind of give us that idea of Peter Parker, this average person who has this power, has that sense of guilt, there is that question of just, was Stan Lee taking too much credit, and those artists deserve more credit, and in their latter years they fought for that. But the thing you have to give Stan, he did, we know, we wrote the dialogue. And if you look at like the diction of Hulk, the way the thing spoke, the mighty mighty Thor, I am Thor, I will smite thee, like that all came from Stan Lee. So you can't take that away from him, and I think that is an amazing accomplishment. That is undeniably the mind of Stan Lee.
Nor the fact that he was such a great ambassador for the Marvel brand. But, you know, before we go, on days like this, it's always nice to speak to fans. And luckily for us, here we have a super fan in our midst. What does Stan Lee mean to you? I mean,
it's silly, but I think he helped me figure out how to be a good person. Right? When I was just, beginning to read, and one of the first things I read were comics, and I read a lot of Marvel comics because I liked the way that they seemed like me. I could relate to Peter Parker. He was always stressing out about school and his friends and his family, and then he went off to be the superhero thing. And I didn't become a superhero, but really that idea of just try to help people and try to make the world a better place. If you look at what Stan had to say about helping people who are, need more help, what he said about bringing us all up, and what he said about racism. I mean, he really set the example of what a true hero, whether you're wearing a cape or slacks, could be. And I think he really influenced me, and of course, as you can see today, just millions and millions of people.
Paying tribute to Stan Lee, you among them. Thank you for that, Eli.